Hi, I'm Sher Peterson and I identify as transgender.
I'm Chantal and I identify as demisexual.
My name is Pinot Duplessis and I identify as gay.
Hi, my name is Shelley Pride and I identify as a queer woman.
Hi, my name's Alana Redcliffe and I am transgender and I identify as a trans woman.
My name is Kerwin Jacobs. My gender identity is genderqueer, or in particular non-binary, and my sexuality is that I'm gay.
My pronouns are she, her, or whatever the female pronouns they are.
She and her.
He and him.
Her, she, and hers.
Because I am non-binary, I identify with the pronouns they or them. Pronouns are important. I'd hope that people get into a culture of asking what they are, because a lot of people just go about calling me he or him, and it's kind of awkward. I don't necessarily correct people a lot of the time, but it would be easier if they did, yeah.
People struggle sometimes with pronouns. It's kind of weird. I don't know why, because I'm pretty possible. Possible would be a look like a woman, even though I wasn't born one.
Usually we would find that in mainstream media, in Hollywood movies, or in any sort of media byproduct, that trans people, especially trans women, are represented by heterosexual men, which shouldn't be the case, because there is over enough trans actors out there that is able to fulfill their own role and their own lived experience. When I think about trans representation, I always think of how do we as trans people represent ourselves, and where do we go to find that sort of accurate representation of ourselves.
It takes away from the fact that there are people living this experience who don't even get to tell their own stories. It's getting told by someone else.
If you look at cisgendered men such as Jared Leto playing a trans woman, it actually removes from the work that trans people could acquire in society, and that is something we definitely have to think about, because how dare he when we are and can.
Trans people fight for the right to, have the identity of being trans, and fight for the right to be legally identified as the gender that they ascribe to. And it's so kind of like dismissive of that when filmmakers and movie makers and series makers, whatever, kind of cast cisgendered men as trans women.
Should you be a heterosexual cisgendered individual, the onus is not on you to represent or speak on behalf of trans people.
While I think that my sexuality is necessarily portrayed within the media industry lately, a lot of it is still very contorted and not necessarily like exactly representative of exactly who I am as a gay man. But then secondly, I feel completely not represented in terms of my gender identity. I think often what's become a norm now is that they sort of conflate what it means to be non-binary versus what it means to be like trans, for example.
Media is still run by a very heteronormative kind of patriarchal and white supremacist idea of queerness.
There are plenty of stories about like highly fashionable urban gay men who are usually white, but the queer experience is so much broader than that.
I'm very, very bothered by the fact that queer people are either seen as white gay men, prancing around shirtless at Pride.
I think that if we just move away from representing white gay men as like the necessary type of queerness that exists in South Africa, then it would be much better.
Queer people are fetishized for being these fabulous, really beautiful, fashionable, rich people that just live our best lives all the time. Or on the other spectrum, we're fetishized for the pain that we experience, or the kind of the oppression we experience.
A lot of the reasons why that is a problem is because of this entanglement of whiteness and queerness and maleness all together that comes from like apartheid stuff and like colonial stuff and this whole queerness is not African thing, and like, I mean, I just guess the privilege of white male identity in itself, which makes that kind of queerness palatable to people.
I would love the media to explore stories of queer people that you wouldn't necessarily automatically associate with the stereotype. And there's so many different people, and often the kind of people that are very silent about these issues or who might not feel comfortable coming out are usually the kinds of people that aren't reflected in media, and they don't see themselves reflected in stories and in TV shows and movies and these things. And I think that we definitely need more complexity.
I'd like to see more kind of representations of Afrikaans queer people, Afrikaans queer women. That's nothing, that doesn't happen.
I watched a very interesting Afrikaans program called Die Boekle, and they, for the very first time, they actually had a Afrikaans character. He didn't fit any of the kind of stereotypes that you would normally see. He went through a lot of the same things that I did, and I think it was quite interesting to actually see a very nuanced, very well portrayed character.
But the majority of the time, if I'm kind of looking for representation in the media, I would also go to YouTube. I learned a lot about myself by looking up on demisexual YouTubers.
In my life, I think I've looked to YouTube where there are tons of different stories being told by different people from different backgrounds.
Places I usually go to are YouTube, in particular channels like Vox, channels like Vice.
Social media and, you know, the YouTube formats, the videos, those have been quite cool because it's also quite interactive.
I would say the best place that I found that has a lot better representation for queer people is like social media, because obviously like everyone can be a content creator, and there's less of a power dynamic involved. The internet gives you so much access, and like social media gives you so much freedom to create media on your own terms and to actually disseminate it. Interestingly
enough, I actually find a lot more of my information and content in journals, and that's only because I do social dynamics. So a big part of that is sociology. So I mean, that's where I gain a lot of the knowledge that I use to then figure out who I am, which is interesting because not a lot of people, one, have access to that, but also not a lot of people actually want to read a journal. And I think that's why it becomes so important that there is media who does do that work, because that's what they're doing essentially for every other identity. It's just that when it comes to queer identity, there's not enough incentive, I guess, for them to actually focus on that.
Print media has been quite offensive. It's just, you have to wait for the issue to come out. It's not like freely available. I have to pay someone to come and read it, and then only to find out that this dude has been talking smack and actually knows nothing about anything.
It's definitely important to remain aware of social developments, remain aware of linguistic advancements, and also to find out from trans people how they would like to be represented in society.
I'd really like for people in society to know that queerness is something that is so nuanced, and that we aren't always in this grip of struggle and oppression. That's part of our life, yes, and that's important to represent. But I'd like for that to be represented alongside the joy that we experience, because there is so much joy.
I definitely think that queer people producing their own media for other queer people is extremely important.
I think like one thing that people just have to like note is that everyone's trans experience is different to another.
The only reason that I feel like more people will start identifying with these sort of non-binary identities is because they'll become more comfortable seeing other people who are exactly like them, or who feel exactly or in similar ways to what they feel.
I think that the most important thing for me is just to say that the queer community is not one thing, that we are a lot of things.
My greater hope is that as a society, as people who consume media, that we create an appetite within ourselves to be more welcoming and accepting and understanding of genders and identities and just people who aren't necessarily exactly like us.